Hello there, and welcome to the Get French Football News preview show. I'm Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening are Adam White and Jeremy Smith. Finally, no more postage stamp viewing of Ligue as it returns to UK TV with BT signing a deal to 2021. And with it comes our first preview show. But before diving into that and a midweek update from the Europa League, here's the latest news. Bordeaux cruise into the next round of qualifying for that Europa League after winning 2-1 at home to Mariupol. They won the first leg. The first leg was victorious 3-1, and Maxime Punje and Sankare scored in the second half to give the French side a comfortable win that sees them into the final qualifying round. And in transfer news in Ligue, we still have some time left. There's been a hive of activity over the past few days. Remy Cabert has joined Saint-Etienne on a permanent deal. Montpellier have signed Bordeaux forward Gaëtan Laborde. Paris Saint-Germain have confirmed the signing of promising German defender Theo Kehrer from Schalke. Shekendoy has come back to Ligue 1 to rejoin Angers. And Guingamp have stolen Ronnie Rodelin from Caen. And that's all for now. But for all your latest in the world of French football, head on over to our website at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. Starting tonight with that result for Bordeaux, and it's a great one to see them through to the next round. Adam, they had a decent result in the first leg, although they were seemed to sort of make a statement by playing Sankare as a forward. There was no such statement tonight, although Nicolas Depreville maybe will be a bit disappointed he didn't grab a goal himself, being the main striker. But the most important thing is the result, and they're through to the next round.
Yeah, absolutely. I think from Bordeaux's point of view, given how the Europa League panned out for them last season when they lost a video turn in the first qualifying round, which was a huge embarrassment, the job here will just be to get through these first two qualifying rounds before facing a real test, which is, I imagine, is against Genk. I haven't been keeping up with the scores this evening, but they were in a comfortable lead going into this game, so that'll be a tough test for them, and that's the game that really matters. But to get through these games without much of an issue is a huge result. And they're much the better side in the first leg in the Ukraine. And I was particularly impressed with the young midfielder. I'm not even going to try and pronounce his name, but Aurélien Tchouameni, who's been very good in pre-season, and it looks like a good sort of proving ground for some young players at Bordeaux. Jules Koundé being another one. So good start to the season for them overall, I suppose, despite the weekend loss to Strasbourg, which is a bit sort of caveated by that Pablo sending off. But yeah, they'll had to be through and a tough tie to come, but that's what they've been aiming for. So a good result.
Yeah, and that's the important thing, really, Jez. I remember this time last year, them obviously crashing out during these qualifiers, which had a somewhat of an impact, at least. Anyway, they had a terrible first half of the season, at least. But is getting to that group stages a prime objective for Les Girondins this season, even though they have had the trouble off the field and such? Is still getting to that goalpost of European football very important to this club?
I think it is, and I think it should be. The debate sort of every year. What's the point of some of these clubs working hard to get a place in the Europa League and then seemingly sort of not fixing it, but throwing the chance away in order to concentrate on the league to get a place in the Europa League? It's all a bit circular. So it's good to see Bordeaux taking it a bit more seriously. It's in their interests as well. I mean, not only just in terms of the sort of cachet of being in Europe and getting through to the main competition, but also you mentioned earlier Poyet making a point of playing Sankare up front. I think it's also important that sort of, I guess, a window for potential signings. They clearly do want reinforcements, certainly up front. They're looking for 2 more strikers. And if you're playing in Europe, that's obviously going to be an attraction for players looking to come in. There's been rumours of them being interested in the Rangers striker Morelos. Well, if say Rangers get into the Europa League and Bordeaux don't, I'm not sure how Rangers did tonight, but then why would he want to move? At least this way, if Bordeaux are in Europe, it gives him something to think about.
And that's the important thing, is for Bordeaux to try and hang on to some players, really, in case an any more interest does come flowing through. They have a skeleton squad with no one to replace, and all can fall down really from there. But they'll be happy to get through. They just don't want a repeat of last season where they sort of crumbled when they felt like it would be a good chance for them. And it's always great for Ligue 1 to have teams doing well in Europe. Let's go back to previews now, at least anyway, in the week ahead. We've got a great weekend's action ahead of us and plenty of it on BT Sport as well, which is nice to see. On with the Friday's game to start off with, gents, and two sides that got off to winning starts, and one slightly more surprisingly, at least anyway, Adam, and that was Ras, who got that victory over Patrick Vieira's Nice in somewhat surprising style. I'm sure many coupon busters have been had from that game, but a solid start. We thought that they might be a team that may struggle this season, but they showed a little bit of steel in this one.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think they definitely did, show steel. That was arguably, the big takeaway from that game against Nice. I think that Rennes' win should be caveated to some extent by the fact that Nice are extremely, depleted from last summer. Ligue 1 sides are accustomed to undergoing sort of strenuous summers where their squad's kind of picked apart. But you could argue that Nice's summer last season was one of the most sort of depletedest of recent years. And Patrick Vieira, very inexperienced by European standards young manager. I know he was at New York City for a substantial amount of time, but they didn't really achieve too much in the MLS overall. Okay, it was a very new franchise, and they perhaps weren't expected to, but he's an experienced coach, and that kind of little bit showed both of those things actually showed quite substantially in that game. I actually happened to watch that game this morning, catching up from the weekend, and Nice, Alan Saint-Maximin aside, kind of struggled to break Rennes down, who David Guillon's a very good, astute young coach. Failed to save them from relegation 2 years ago, but having been given the job sort of a year ago now, has done very, very well after Michel Zakarian kind of failed to bring them up, perhaps unsurprisingly, given his teams don't really score any goals. But they looked organised and they looked solid. And despite the loss of a number of key players, you look at Juven Janvier has gone to Brentford, and I was a huge fan of Diego Viganato for his time in Ligue 1 and in Ligue 2. Lost him to the Middle East, and Jordi Sibachou's obviously gone to Rennes, and I kind of felt those additions would be very difficult to make up. But Alexis Ramal's a very experienced Ligue 1 signing. Moussa Doumbia scored the goal, is a good little signing from Rostov as well. A really nice finish for him. Perhaps the keeper could have done slightly better, but still good effort, and some really good strengthening from Ligue 2 in terms of defence with Fontaine from Clermont, who was very good there last season, and Colin Gistam from Vitória Guimarães, who's obviously come from Portugal, was a solid player there. So they've made some astute signings, and although I don't think they're going to score many goals, Chavario was very, very isolated up front. They could be a solid side in much the same way Montpellier and perhaps even Nantes have been in recent years. So good result, and a great start for them. A historic club, great to have them back in Ligue 1.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to have some champagne football, at least anyway, for a change. On to the opponents, Jez, in Lyon, who obviously we have high expectations of this season, and they've got a relatively, some would say, soft start to the season with the first 5 games you're looking at. Obviously, they won on opening weekend against Amiens. They face Reims this weekend. Strasbourg and Nice come at home for the next 2 games, and given how Nice showed in that first game, maybe that is a little bit easier than it looked on paper. And also an away game at Caen before they face the other Olympique side in Marseille. It's a strong outing last time out. Got a couple of goals. It maybe was a little bit more trickier than they maybe have anticipated, but they got over the line nonetheless, with Bertrand Traoré playing relatively well. Memphis Depay frustrating, but getting an excellent goal, really. This is another one that they should be looking at now to start racking up the points to have a really strong start to the season.
Yeah, absolutely. As you said, it's not the most strenuous start, which is kind of ideal for them with certain players not having had a full break during the summer and gradually coming back. Fekir has been ruled out of this game; he's not quite ready yet. So yeah, first match of the season against Amiens, it wasn't particularly impressive, but they did what they needed to do, and they'll hope that the same happens this weekend. I think it'll be a little bit more of a test, but they couldn't really have asked for a better sort of introduction to the season where they can sort of gradually ease their way in rather than have to really hit the ground running and get to their best straight away, which isn't necessarily their forte. The midfield 3 that we all raved about last year, I don't think any of them were particularly impressive against Amiens. But when you've got Traoré, who's had a really good pre-season actually, and sort of just carried on where he left off, and Depay, who has not had a particularly good pre-season, I think probably has been angling for a move for most of it. But you know, if he sort of comes to terms with the fact that he's staying and knuckles down, maybe with an eye on a move in January or even next summer, and comes out with more of those kind of free kicks, then Lyon are going to be okay. So yeah, nothing special last weekend, but they did what they had to do, and they'll aim to do the same this weekend.
Yeah, and it's good that they've got so many options, even with Fekir sidelined and Cornet maybe out of the door. They've still got Terrier, they've still got Guerrieri, they've still got plenty of players waiting in the wings, at least anyway, in those attacking positions. They maybe just need one more or two in the midfield, like you say, Jez. Let's get some predictions then. Adam, what do you think the score will be in this one?
I think it's an interesting start to the weekend. I think Reims are gonna be involved, but it's Lyon 3-1 possibly.
Jez, what do you think?
I'll go 2-1. I agree. I think Lyon won't have it entirely their own way, but I think they should come out on top in the end. So yeah, 2-1.
I think it's going to be a stickler one for Lyon, really. I don't think Reims will come away with anything other than pride, unfortunately, but I think a 1-0 win for Lyon will give them a little bit of a relaxation. I just think that Reims might be a little bit weak up front, which may sort of hinder them, especially with Sibacho gone as well. On to another two sides that started well, but maybe a little bit more surprising in the sense of how they played, at least anyway, with expectations. And that's starting with Monaco, Adam. They're heading against Lille, who also had a great game, and we'll come on to them. But we were a little bit unsure of how to take Monaco before the start of the season, with the changes that they've had, the amount of players, the experience that has gone out of the squad, and a lot of young players left in. But it was the older heads, or at least the experienced heads, that got the goals against Nantes, and they were clinical, and they showed that maybe there is a bit of evolution going on, and still with players to come back in.
Yeah, they did. They did. That's a very good point. In that they went to Nantes, who fancied for a European push over the summer, and they got this very comfortable in the end 3-1 result. Although Nantes started the first half very well in that game, but Monaco ended up winning pretty comfortably, and they managed to do that without Falcao, who only got sort of 30 odd minutes from the bench. Keita Balde is obviously going back to Italy. Golovin's not fit yet. Sidibe's still not in the side. Amine Touré's out of the side. Subasic is still recovering from the World Cup. So there's a lot of players to come back, and they won what was potentially a very, very difficult game relatively comfortably. So there's obviously one big plus for them for Jardim there. Although the caveat to that is that you look back at the Trophée des Champions, where they played a very similar side, and PSG, who obviously far better than most of the league, but a representative of the top four, dispatch them very, very easily. And when they play sides in and around them, Lyon and Marseille in particular, it's interesting. It'd be interesting to see whether a similar situation occurs as it did with PSG. Will Marseille and Lyon just be too strong for them, and Monaco won't achieve that target of finishing in the top three, which is obviously their stated aim and very important for their project in terms of financing and in terms of exposure for their players. So although it was a really, really good start, there might be some growing pains for Cardozo. Nantes, who's obviously playing a very different style to Ranieri, very sort of possession-based and pressing-centric, if you like. A big change for a very sort of fresh kind of squad, in terms of tactics and in terms of personnel. So there may be a few caveats to that performance. But I think Monaco will take, and Jardim in particular, will take positives both in the fact that as I said, lots of players come back, and in the fact this is a developing team, and Jardim is the man to develop young players, as he's proven over season after season. He is the perfect coach for that. So you look at players like Tielemans, who's hopefully going to have a bigger season. Pele, who didn't get a game at the weekend, but still is a very, very promising young player. Was very good at Rio Ave last season. Sofiane Diop, I thought, was really, really good as well. So there are so many positives for Monaco team, but the question still stands as to whether it's enough for them to push into the top three, which is obviously huge for their project, or not. I have a feeling not, but a promising start nonetheless.
Yeah, it was great to see Diop start. It's always nice that Monaco will always, even no matter what age you are, they will throw you in at the deep end if they feel you're ready for it. And they proved it again at the weekend, and hopefully they can do it some more this season, because there's plenty of them there. And they do face a possibly trickier trip than we may have anticipated than the start of the season, just given that Lille was so good at the weekend, getting that 3-1 win against Rome, where they looked a lot more dynamic. They looked a lot more attack-minded, free-flowing. And although there's a lot of rumours that Pepe maybe still be on the move, there's a couple of teams that are interested in his services. They look like a different team under Galtier, even under his own leadership at the end of last season.
Yeah, last year they really struggled, and arguably were lucky that there were 2 or 3 teams worse than them. For a lot of the season, they looked like they were going to go down and that they would deserve it. But they've come out of it, and the main thing is that they've come out of it stronger. I think it was very character building for quite a young squad, and then they've sort of built off that. Had a really good transfer window, I think, brought in some really good players. And for me, the question mark was that a lot of those good players were more forward-looking players, and I was thinking, well, Galtier has always shown himself to be a really defensive-minded coach. So, is that going to work? But the signs on Saturday were excellent, and the front 3 linked brilliantly. They got a goal each. Pepe, Motiba, and Bamba. Benzia played well behind them, and it's not often that we said that in his career, despite all the high hopes we had when he started. So, and there's still Remy to come in as well if the DNCG okay it. So. Lots of positive signs there if they can keep that sort of attacking vim and vigor going, I guess. And again, strong character to come back from a goal down as well. So I think everyone expected that Lille would have a better season than they did last year, but I think the way they played and the result they got was actually quite pleasantly surprising. And if they can keep Pepe and really get that understanding built even further between the front 3 or 4, then I think they could cause some damage this season.
They could be a really tricky team, and a tricky team for Monaco to have to host in their opening home game. So let's get some predictions, and I'll start on this one. I think that it's going to be tricky, but I think that maybe a bit of an attacking game more than anything. Both have shown in the past they're not always the greatest at defending. I think it might be a 3-2 win to Monaco, so do keep your eyes on this one. Jez, what do you think?
I was tempted to say 3-2 as well. I'll say Monaco again 3-1, and again it will be a flattering result for them.
Adam?
I'm gonna back Leo a little bit here. I think maybe a 1-1 draw.
Yeah, it's strangely finely balanced at this start of the season when you've only seen one game. It's always you're questioning your mind depending on that result that they had previously. But certainly, I think going to be a really interesting game. One side, the next game we're going to have a look at maybe slightly less interesting, at least because the 2 teams are on a bit of a downer. Although obviously Bordeaux's Europa League win this evening might give them a bit of a buoyance, but we'll come on to them because Toulouse are currently sat at the bottom of the table after last Friday's result, Adam, where they lost 4-0 to Marseille. A bit of a drubbing, maybe somewhat flattering to Low, at least at the very end for that amount of goals. But is there some worries already for Toulouse that they brought a few players in? It looked like they balanced the squad a little bit more. They looked okay at times in that game against Velodrome, but it's never nice to lose 4-0 on your opening game.
No, it really isn't. And I think it would have been quite deflating for Toulouse to lose so by such a big margin. But I think you're right on 2 counts. First of all, it was flattering. Marseille scored twice in sort of the final few minutes. That Thauvin goal was pretty fortunate. And Germain, I think, might have been offside for his goal as well. So there are a couple of, sort of caveats there from Marseille's point of view, but you can't ignore the fact that Marseille were by far the better team. And unfortunately for Toulouse, although there's been quite a lot of turnover this summer, Lafont and Diop, they cashed in on those two, both the sort of most 2 marketable players, if you like. Lafont going to Fiorentina and Diop going for West Ham, not starting for West Ham, bizarrely, against Liverpool, given how they defended. But even so, hopefully he'll assert himself as the season goes on. But, the players that came in, there were a lot of hopes for players like Manu Garcia and John Bosco, who's been very good for Lens in Ligue 2, and Mathieu Giuseppe, who I was a huge fan of at Metz. Assist-wise, he was absolutely brilliant, and Baptiste Reina is a very good replacement in goal. But it was kind of more of the same. And I think you're right in that although the margin of victory was a little bit flattering, it was still sort of representative a little bit of the game, in that Toulouse were quite a few goals worse than Marseille, and there are already sort of fears creeping in, because if you think about Diop's importance as captain and how sort of monolithic he was a centre-back at times last season, and you think of Julian's form, I know that he wasn't very good in this game, but the previous 2 friendlies, he got some seriously bad reviews from Toulouse fans against against Nîmes when they lost 4-3, and a 4-1 defeat at Crystal Palace as well. He was terrible in both those games, so there could be some serious weaknesses at the back. And just to sort of add to that, Kevin Amion, who's for me is a fullback and not a centre back. It looks like Alan Casanova wants to play him as Julien's partner, having now, you know, survived the English transfer window and Julien not left for England, although given his form I don't know why he would. But Amion looked very, very shaky against Marseille. So although they may have strengthened in sort of more creative areas, which since Oscar Trejo left last season, end of the season before last, has been a huge issue, there's still some serious deficiencies in his team. And all right, it's the 16th of August, there's still a couple of weeks left in his transfer window, but they need a defender. And if you ask me, they need several defenders. Francois Mabanje has never been good enough for me in this division. And even at right back, Clement Michelin's a very promising player, but even if Steve Yaro gets fit and comes back in, or even Amiens moves back to right back, there's some serious deficiencies there. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Some worries going forward, and perhaps deservedly beaten in the end, although Marseille were lucky to get the 2 goals at the end, and some serious worries for Toulouse under Casanova, who remains a bizarre appointment for me. But I think there's still a long way to go. There's still some promising players, and hopefully they can turn it around. Because you know my love for Toulouse, Nathan. I'm a big Toulouse fan, but it looks a little bit worrying so far.
Yeah, you might call yourself the real Casanova, really, well, the manager at least, anyway. But the positive for La Ville, at least this weekend, Jez, and it's sort of exasperated by after tonight, because it sounded like all sunshine and roses with them going through, but Gus Poyet has sort of been a bit explosive afterwards, at least for Les Girondins, sort of stating that he's not very happy with the sale of Laborde, especially because he's unlikely really to get cover in, having already wanted a striker in the door. Things are slowly coming off the rails, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean, as far as I know, this takeover that's been on and off all summer hasn't happened yet. So I don't know what money Bordeaux got to play with in terms of bringing anyone in anyway. Laborde is not sort of pushed on as much as we hoped he would when he was impressing for some of the France youth teams. But considering they're so thin on the ground in terms of attack, and de Preville hasn't had the best of times since he joined Bordeaux last year, it seems a very strange decision to sell him. And I mean, I think I mentioned before, as a Brighton fan, you have to take Poyet's threats to quit if he doesn't get transfer money with a pinch of salt. But in this case, I can certainly understand why he's annoyed. And if they don't bring anyone in, I think they are going to struggle. I sort of alluded to it earlier on with Nice. I'm not sure that the team behind the strikers are as good at Bordeaux as they are at Nice, and I can see them sort of being the Lille of last season. I'm not sure that they'll go down or anything, but and they do have a couple of really good young players like Chouameni, like Koundé, and Youssef that we mentioned earlier, and have already sort of impressed in the Europa League. But they need at least one striker, probably 2, to take a bit of pressure off these younger players who aren't even out and out strikers themselves. They're not going to be able to do it every week, and I'm not sure what the directors or the management at Bordeaux are thinking right now, but they're certainly not doing the team or their coach any favours.
The interesting point I've sort of want to add on this one, to sort of don't really want to defend any strange owners or anything like that, but at least from Poyet's sort of comments, is that they barely played Laborde. Every time they played him under Gus Poyet, he never really scored the goals. He kept bringing him off. He ended up not playing him. He played Sankari as a striker in the first leg of that tie with Laborde available. It seems like a little bit of ranting just because someone's left more than anything. It seems a little bit like he's gusting into a wind, hoping that if he kicks up as much of a fuss, he might get a little bit of funding. But they weren't going to use Laborde, really. It wasn't going to be. He didn't start the weekend. He wasn't going to start in the Europa League game. He did play an enormous amount towards the back end of the season. It just seems a bit like a bit blood and fluster for the matter of nothing, which seems to be, much like you said, Jez, seems to be the quota really for Gus Poyet and management style, at least anyway. But we'll see if his threats come to anything in the next week or so. I have a feeling they may not do. He might be, if I count his chickens, he's still at Le Girondin more than anything. Predictions then now, and I will start with you this time, Jez. What do you think in this one?
Well, this is, I said that it's kind of an easy way into the season for Lyon. This is kind of the opposite, as you said. Both teams are already kind of maybe on the ropes is a bit strong, but coming off bad results last week, and this is a local derby as well, so it really kind of ups the ante a bit. I think it's going to be a pretty nervy match, and I think Toulouse might squeeze a 1-0 win.
Adam, what do you think?
I think this is a very close game as well, and I think Toulouse at home. I think this team has a lot more to offer than it showed away at Marseille. I think they're going to be much better at home this year. So I kind of think 2-1 Toulouse, perhaps.
I'm going to apologise to everyone who managed to try and watch this game, because I just feel like Toulouse looked a bit toothless at times against Marseille. Bordeaux have just sold a striker and are willing to play midfielder up front. All signs point to 0-0, unfortunately, and possibly the first draw in Ligue 1. We've not had one yet, so that might be the first one to keep your eyes on and place your bets on. Final game of the weekend, and the final game we'll be previewing tonight involves, again, two sides that got victories in Nîmes and Marseille. Obviously, one, again, Adam, more surprisingly than the other, but what a tremendous comeback from Les Crocodiles last time out. 3-1 down, 10 men, came back to win 4-3. Could you get more of a morale boost at the start of the season than that?
No, you really couldn't. It was brilliant, wasn't it? I happened to watch this game yesterday, I think, and they were absolutely fantastic. I really think Nîmes could be a really good addition to Ligue 1 in their current guys, if you like. Bernard Blancois playing the way he sets out his team is extremely attacking by Ligue 1 standards. He plays with two strikers, and they were Ligue 2's top scorers last season with 75 goals. And between Umut Bozok and Rachid Aloui, who's injured at the moment, got 41 goals between them. And they play with those two up front, and they play with two wingers who at the weekend with Dennis Bouanga, who's a bit of a coup, signing him from Lorient, who was a lot of Ligue 1 sides were looking at over the course of the summer, and Salah Thioub, who was brilliant on the day, scored a fantastic opening goal, and they just kept attacking even when they were 3-1 down, undeservedly 3-1 down, if you ask me. Couple of silly mistakes, which I imagine when you play like that, you're going to concede some silly goals, but their heads didn't drop, and they kept attacking, and they kept playing the way that that got them promoted. And on balance of play, they deserved at least a point, and especially after it was 3-2, I think, when Florian Miguel was sent off, deservedly, if you ask me, two pretty reckless yellow cards that he got, and they just kept attacking, and a brilliant diving header from Clement Deprez, who came on and scored twice. It was great to see, and I can't wait to watch them further this season. They could be this season's Dijon. And I know, Nathan, how much you liked watching Dijon, and we all did, watching Dijon last season, especially at home. Perhaps Nîmes can be a similar sort of influence on the league, and that they can play a different style of football to perhaps the rest of Ligue 1 and give us some exciting games. And you look at Strasbourg, I think last season when they got promoted, and they played Marseille at home, and Marseille obviously playing a very similar way to they did last season. It ended up 3-3, and perhaps this game could be an opportunity for a similar sort of promoted side, on the up against a Marseille team who are going to go out and look to win the game, score goals as well. So there's potential for a really exciting game here. But hopefully, after that Angers win, Nîmes will be buoyed sufficiently, and they'll play that way for the rest of the year, because it could be really exciting. And I think they're fully equipped to stay up. So an exciting game ahead, and Nîmes, I cover them this season, Football Radar. Hopefully, I'm looking forward to some exciting games involving them this year.
Yeah, it'd be great to have another side that's a bit more willing to attack in Ligue 1, much like Dijon were last season. It's always great to have that kind of addition to our league. With it can be quite defensive. But on to Marseille, Jez. And obviously, we discussed earlier that they got a great 4-0 win against Toulouse to start the season. It was nice and solid for them. Dimitri Payet grabbing a couple of goals and showing the form that he showed just before his injury at the end of last season. Tovan obviously coming on and scoring doesn't hurt much. Even Valère Germain getting involved. They look pretty cohesive, even without the Catalan Carbo is obviously still on the sidelines. No other additions as of yet, although they are still trying to possibly get in another striker. They look to you, Jez, like a good, solid side that are maintaining the form that they had from last season.
As things stand, yeah. I mean, as you said earlier, it's difficult to read too much out of first matches of the season, and certainly a match against a pretty poor Toulouse. But again, they beat what was in front of them, and not only that, but they scored 4 goals in the process. So, Payet is probably to Marseille's advantage. that he got that injury that kept him out of the World Cup, as sad as it was for him, because he's refreshed and raring to go and had a really good game. Sanson's pass to Germain shows that he's still got it. Kamara looks like he's sort of really going to step up and mature this year as well. So there's definitely positive signs there. I still think that last year they built their great season on kind of beating all the teams that they should have beaten and going missing against all the other top teams. So they need to improve in that aspect, because I'm not sure you can rely on them being so effective in their matches against all the other teams. But certainly under Garcia, he's got them playing confidently, playing for each other, and possibly most importantly, really having the fans behind them. So yeah, I'd expect them to at least kind of keep up what they did last year. It's just that you'd want them to push on from that, and I'm not 100% sure they can do that. Which isn't to say they won't finish in the top three, because like Adam said, I've got a feeling Monaco may drop off, but I'm not, just so far with their transfers or lack of transfers, I'm not sure they put them in themselves in a position to really kick on.
And that's the interesting thing, at least about their schedule, that they play Monaco in a couple of weeks' time at the very start of September. That will be a nice water test for both of those sides, really, on a Sunday evening, to see exactly where they've come after the summers and with the transfer business done by that point, seeing exactly where both stand at the start of the season. Prediction time then again, and I'll start with you, Adam. What do you think in this one?
I think goals, but it depends what sort of side Marseille put out. But I'm going to go 3-2 Marseille.
Jez?
I was going to go 3-2 Marseille as well. Am I allowed to?
You are absolutely allowed to. We're not doing, just to let the audience know as well, we won't be doing our sort of prediction totals this year, because with a mix of guests that we have, it would be difficult to keep up on everyone and making sure the points are all correct. But I'll keep score of myself at least anyway, which is the important bit. And I'll go for a Marseille win as well. I'm going for a bit more exciting. I'm going to go 4-2. I think it could be a really terrific game. Circle it on your calendar, get it on your TV box. This one is going to be one to certainly tune into. Just going to finish tonight with some of the transfer news. I'm dropping this on our guests to sort of finish off with a couple of ones that I wanted to talk about that's from the news earlier. Obviously, there's some really nice deals. Remy Cabella going to Saint-Etienne, we all probably think is a good deal. We talked about Thilo Kehrer going to Paris Saint-Germain on Monday, but a couple of deals. Then I want to start with Gaëtan Laborde. We talked about it very briefly, at least anyway, earlier, him heading to Montpellier the last couple of days. Adam, what do you think to the move in terms of a Montpellier standpoint? They are looking for a striker. I know they're rumours that they may be trying to move Giovanni Sio on, but do you think that Laborde can be that man for Michel Desakarian to start grabbing them the goals that they desperately need?
I think he'll make some headway. I think it's an interesting signing, given they've already got Andy Delors, who's obviously the player that they would have pinned quite a lot of their hopes on in terms of goal scoring this season, given how he was at Caen in a similarly sort of workman-like team. He scored 12, 13 Ligue goals the season before he went to Mexico, and then came back and started brilliantly at Toulouse, and it didn't really work out in the end. So they would have been putting a lot of hopes on him. But I quite like Gaëtan Laborde. I think he was very, very good at Clermont in Ligue 2. Now 2 seasons ago, he was injured for quite a lot of last season with Bordeaux. But I think if he was one of those players, if he played consistently, his goal tally would probably be pretty high. But the fact that he's not the most skillful or eye-catching of players sort of kind of lets him down a little bit. And although he's quite effective, perhaps isn't the most. He's not a player that you would sort of build an attack around, which I think is probably partially why Bordeaux sold him for such a small fee. It was only sort of 4 million euros, which given his age, small. So I think he'll contribute certainly to Montpellier's goal tally, but whether it's enough to give them the goals they want is another question. Be interesting to see who starts over him and Delors. They may even play them both together, but they're very similar sort of players. So I think he may even be there as sort of a backup to Delors, but it'll be interesting how it goes. But a loss for Bordeaux nonetheless.
Just trying to think of Michel Desakarian even tempting fate of playing 2 strikers at once. It might be a little bit too gung-ho even for him. Very final deal I wanted to talk about really this evening with you, Jez, as well, is an interesting one, I think, at least anyway, and that's Ronnie Rodelin heading to Guingamp. There's obviously a bit of a experienced hole left there, with obviously Jimmy Briand heading to pastures new, and Cole seemingly must have been a bit reluctant to let him go. But a good addition for Guingamp to bring in what can be a talented player.
Yeah, I think so. He's, as you said, he can be a talented player. He sort of goes through phases where he scores some lovely goals, comes up with quite a few assists, and looks a talented all-round player, and then goes through other phases where he does very little. But I mean, in a sense, you could say that describes a lot of the Guingamp team, including Briand, who's just left. So I think he could fit into that team well. A good work ethic, which I think Conguare likes, and certainly I think that's one of the things that they liked from Briand, what perhaps has frustrated Conguare about some of Guingamp's younger talents. So he's not a like-for-like replacement for Briand. They're slightly different players, but I think he's a good player to bring in terms of footballing ability, also that little bit of experience, which may sort of help some of the younger members of the team along. And I could see him forming a good relationship with players like Saliba if he ends up staying.
It does seem like an interesting signing to me. I think he could be. It's going to go either one or two ways, isn't it? It's going to be either a nice solid signing and a good experience for those young players especially, or he's going to sort of flop immensely. But we'll wait and see on that one. That's all that we have for this week. My thanks to Adam, Jez, and all of you listening at home. Do join us again for the main show that will be coming to you later, the start of next week. But for now, enjoy your weekend of football.